Today, we take for granted how easy it is to go on to do higher education. And by easy, I don't mean easy as far as grades or qualifications or O levels, A levels, SATs, and all the other methods and weird ways we do to get into these places, but in the fact that it's not impossible because you don't make enough money. It's not impossible because you are of the wrong class structure, or it's not impossible because you don't want to go into a clergy. All of these things were roadblocks for so many people over the years. Now add to it the fact that you can't even speak your language at said institution, and it's another roadblock. So, with all that said and done, let's talk about Welsh universities, shall we? Trioso, and welcome back to the Welsh History Podcast, episode 247, The Long Climb to Welsh Universities. In the latter half of the 19th century, Wales saw the birth of modern higher education. The universities that emerged during this period weren't just academic institutions, rather they were symbols of national pride, engines of social mobility, and part of a broader cultural and political awakening across the country. So how did it all begin? Of course, we know that for centuries, as universities grew in places like Oxford and Cambridge and Paris and Berlin and across most of Western Europe and Eastern Europe eventually, the one area where they weren't growing and weren't really happening is Wales. Before the 19th century, Wales had no universities of its own. If a Welsh man, typically, wanted a university education, they would have to travel to England, usually to Oxford or Cambridge. And these institutions, of course, were largely inaccessible to anyone below a certain income level or below a certain birth level. All of that, of course, double if these people were Welsh language first speakers and nonconformists. The lack of a university system in Wales was more than just an educational gap. It was symbolic of a deeper inequality. As historian John Davies wrote, it was not until the second half of the 19th century that the Welsh began to ask themselves, why were they the only nation in Europe without a university? If you were to think of a place in Wales, which would be the center of Welsh learning and education, the foundation stone, as it were, for Welsh higher education, you might not consider Aberystwyth to be the first option. In fact, the first discussion of the University of Wales was during the short-lived reign of Owen Glyndwr as Prince of Wales. His idea was to establish two universities, one in the north and one in the south. Since these were religious training institutions, I suspect they were meant to be in Bangor and possibly St. David, or possibly Llandaff, but we never got that far. However, in the story of Welsh higher education, no institution looms larger in symbolic importance than the University College of Wales, Aberystwyth. Founded in 1872, it was the first university-level institution in Wales. And it was born not from royal patronage or government initiative or church initiative, but from a collective will and determination of the Welsh people themselves. One man, above all, is credited with the vision that brought the college to life, Hugh Owen. Born in 1804 in Dalgelly, Owen was a self-educated civil servant who rose through the ranks of the Poor Law Commission in London. But despite his successes in England, his heart remained in Wales, and he devoted much of his life to educational reform. In 1854, Owen published a pamphlet entitled Llythyr at Fy Ngymru, a letter to my fellow Welshmen, in which he laid out a passionate case for the creation of a university in Wales. He warned that Welsh youth were being held back by the lack of access to affordable and relevant higher education, and argued that a national college would help raise the intellectual and moral condition of the people. His vision was influenced by the success of the University of London, which had pioneered the idea of a secular and inclusive university model in the 1830s. Owen wanted the same for Wales, a college that was non-denominational, accessible to middle and working classes, and infused with Welsh values. The road from idea to reality was long and difficult. Without government funding or existing institutions to build from, everything had to be raised from scratch. In the 1860s, a nationwide fundraising campaign was launched, and ministers preached about the colleges from the pulpits, chapels held special collections, and donations were made by quarrymen, farmers, shopkeepers, and schoolchildren alike. Pennies that were collected in tin boxes labeled Cymraith I Goleg Cenedl Cymru, or Aid for the National College of Wales. This effort became legendary. This phrase, I brysgol a godwyd ar genegawr wiren, the university built on the pennies of the people, in English, became part of the institutional identity. It was a college rooted in the working communities of Wales, especially in the rural and nonconformist communities. As one of the contemporary ministers noted in I Goliad newspaper of 1870, we build not for privilege, but for the future of the nation. Let every coin given be an act of faith in the Welsh destiny. After much deliberation, the seaside town of Aberystwyth was chosen as the site of the new university. Its location was considered to be central, and its symbolic value was strong. A Welsh-speaking town with a growing reputation as a cultural center and spa resort. But, most importantly, the Castle Hotel, a large disused building on the seafront, was available for purchase. Pennies are counted as well as gathered. The hotel was acquired for £10,000, a significant sum at the time, and hastily converted into a college. The building was in poor repair and lacked many of the facilities expected of a university, but it was enough to get started, and so they very much did. On October 16, 1872, the University College of Wales opened its doors with a modest ceremony. Just 26 students were enrolled, all male, mostly Welsh-speaking, and drawn from the middle class and nonconformist families. The teaching staff was small but dedicated. The first principal was Thomas Charles Edwards, the grandson of the great Methodist preacher Thomas Charles of Bala. Edwards was a powerful orator and a product of Oxford, a firm believer in the moral mission of education, and under his leadership, the college survived its rocky beginnings. In one of his earliest speeches, Edwards said, "Let this college be a lamp on the hill, shining light on the path of Welsh youth wherever they may be." The first decade, of course, was anything but easy. The college had no degree awarding power, limited resources, and ongoing debt. The building was nearly destroyed in a fire in 1885. Only through the continuous support of the public, Welsh chapels, and education reformers did the college endure. Still, Aberystwyth became a magnet for young Welsh scholars. It offered courses in sciences, classics, and modern languages. The emphasis on non-sectarianism attracted nonconformist students excluded from Oxbridge, the name for the combination of Oxford and Cambridge, and the use of Welsh alongside English helped it become a national institution in spirit, if not law. The college's motto, Need byd heb wybodaeth, a world without knowledge is no world at all, captured the spirit of its mission. By the 1880s, the success of Aberystwyth demonstrated that Wales could sustain higher educational institutions, but there was a growing realization that a single college, especially one located far from the industrial centers of the South, wasn't enough. South Wales, a region booming with coal, iron, and shipping, demanded its own college. The industrial wealth generated here could fund the new institution, and local politics and civic leaders argued that educational need of the region's youth were being ignored. As you can imagine, it's a pretty long way from Cardiff and Swansea to Aberystwyth. Even today, it's not a short trip, but then it would have been quite a bit longer because you were strictly relying either on a horse or a train. In 1883, the University College of South Wales and Monmouthshire was founded in Cardiff with strong backing from local government and business leaders. The college's creation had been championed by influential figures such as Lord Aberdare, Henry Bruce, a former Home Secretary and tireless advocate for Welsh education. Lord Aberdare had chaired the departmental Committee on Intermediate and Higher Education in Wales, 1880 to 1881, which recommended the establishment of 2 additional colleges, one for the north and one in the south, to complement Aberystwyth. The report recognized the unique linguistic, cultural, and industrial needs of Wales and laid the groundwork for Cardiff's foundation. Initially, the college was operated from a temporary building on Newport Road, and the teaching began with a small staff, but from the outset, Cardiff had ambitious aspirations, and unlike Aberystwyth, it quickly developed ties with professional training, particularly in medicine, engineering, and mining, aligning its curriculum with the industrial and economic landscape of South Wales. Part of the way to entice investment is to make it meaningful to a community where the money lies. This is not uncommon in universities today, but definitely helps. A major and controversial figure in the early years was John Patrick Crichton Stewart, the third Marquis of Bute, a fabulously wealthy Catholic aristocrat benefactor of the city. Bute was expected to be a key patron of the college, but tension emerged. The college's founders insisted on non-sectarianism, while Bute, who had funded the churches and the Catholic institutions, hesitated to support a college that excluded religious instruction. In the end, Bute donated the land but refused further involvement. The college turned instead to the public subscription and coal-owning elite, including the Tredegar and Crauchete families. Despite early challenges, Cardiff's college thrived. It quickly became more cosmopolitan and outward-looking than its northern and western cousins, reflecting the character of the capital city as it would eventually become. It was also attracting students from across Britain, not just Wales, and offered training in law, commerce, and civil service, areas that would shape the Welsh professional class. The story of our third university, the University College of North Wales, located in Bangor, was one of deep grassroots support, especially from the most iconic communities in 19th century Wales, the quarrymen of Gwynedd. In 1884, the University College of North Wales opened its doors just 1 year after Cardiff. Its location in Bangor, a strategic cathedral city with strong cultural links to Welsh-speaking communities, and was within reach of the slate quarrying heartlands. What makes Bangor unique among the Welsh colleges is the level of working-class involvement in its founders. In towns like Bethesda, Llanberis, and Blaenau Festiniog, quarry workers, many of them staunch nonconformists and union members, held chapel meetings and penny collections and public lectures to raise funds. These were men who often worked in brutal conditions but valued education deeply. To them, a college in North Wales was not just an academic venture, it was a moral and national imperative. As one resolution from the chapel in Bethesda put it, quote, "We, the working men of Arfon, resolve to contribute what we can to the education of our sons and daughters, that they may lead Wales forward to the path of knowledge and righteousness." The Perrin family, owners of the giant Perrin slate quarry, offered some initial support, but much of the funding came from the people themselves. The college began a temporary accommodation before a permanent site was secured on a hill overlooking the Menai Strait, a location as picturesque as it was symbolic. From the outset, Bangor was deeply tied to the Welsh language. Welsh was spoken in lectures and seminars, and the college developed strong ties with the Eisteddfod and the growing movement to preserve and promote Welsh culture. The first principal, Francis Edward Hughes, oversaw a small but dynamic college that offered courses in arts, sciences, theology, and Welsh literature. Students were often older, many of them were school teachers or chapel preachers who had saved for years to afford higher education. Student societies blossomed early. Debating clubs, literary circles, and Welsh language forums gave Bangor its unique cultural vitality. By the end of the 1880s, Wales had 3 university colleges: Aberystwyth, Cardiff, and Bangor. Each reflected a different strand of the Welsh identity. Aberystwyth with pioneering spirit and national unity, Cardiff with its industrial modernity and professional ambition, and Bangor with its cultural preservation and grassroots democracy. The Welsh universities also provided an unprecedented route for social mobility. Before the 1870s, a university education was largely the preserve of the elite. But in Wales, thanks to public subscriptions and nonconformist beliefs in self-improvement, higher education became increasingly accessible to the children of farmers, miners, quarrymen, and shopkeepers. Many students studied part-time to enter college after years of work. Others came from intermediate schools established under the 1889 Welsh Intermediate Education Act, something we'll talk further about in future episodes, a direct outgrowth of the university movement and its momentum. The college champions meritocratic values, the idea that you have to merit your position and not receive it by fiat or by birthright. Entrance was based on scholarship and ability, not social class or denomination. For many, this represented a radical alternative to the English system still dominated by elite boarding schools and Anglican churches. In chapel-rich communities like the valleys of Glamorgan and the slate towns of Carnarvonshire, the dream of sending a child to college became a powerful symbol of pride and hope. The long-term consequences, of course, of this transformation are hard to overstate. A national intellectual class emerged, fluent in both Welsh and English, capable of advocating for Wales within Britain and in global arenas. They formed the backbone of the Welsh contribution to science, medicine, literature, and politics throughout the 20th century. And while challenges remained, particularly around funding, Welsh language rights, and regional inequality, the creation of Welsh universities marked a fundamental shift. Wales was now a nation that educated its own. In 1893, these 3 institutions united to form the University of Wales, a federal institution that would grant degrees, coordinate academic standards, and represent Wales on the British and international stages. By the close of the 19th century, the university movement in Wales had achieved something remarkable: a national system of higher education rooted in the people, shaped by the language and values of the country, and geared towards the betterment of Welsh life. But the founding of the University of Wales in 1893 was more than just an academic milestone. It was a profound moment of national affirmation. The late 19th century was a period of extraordinary cultural revival in Wales. It was the revival and rise of the Eisteddfod, the expansion of Welsh language publishing, and the campaign for Welsh intermediate education systems, and then eventually a growing demand for Welsh self-government, which were all rising at the same time. They were growing in power and influence in the national sentiments and thought processes, something that's hard to, I think, understand without the knowledge of where we came from and how weak, for so many years, Welsh had felt. The university colleges, of course, played a central role in that awakening. They trained the first generation of Welsh-speaking academics outside of the clergy system who would write histories, grammars, and dictionaries that gave form to modern Welsh culture. They nurtured future leaders and reformers, ministers, teachers, journalists, and politicians who would shape 20th century Wales. They legitimized the idea that Wales was not just a province or a region, but a distinct nation with its own intellectual life. As historian Geraint H. Jenkins noted, quote, "The universities became a laboratory of the Welsh mind, places where national identity was examined, defended, and projected into the world." Figures like Owen Morgan Edwards, a graduate and later lecturer at Aberystwyth, epitomized this dual mission of education and national service. Edwards would go on to become the chief inspector of schools for Wales and a passionate campaigner for the Welsh language in the classroom. It really is remarkable to see how quickly education became a key point in this period. Think of only 50 years before this. We're talking about the Blue Books. We're talking about, the struggle that most nonconformist schools were having, as they were basically forced into only teaching Sunday schools in Welsh, and they were usually held in very rudimentary conditions quite frequently. And the dominance of the English language schools, especially in the South, and how they were so influential in trying to stamp out Welsh language. Well, this is starting to turn that. It's finally starting to react to this centuries-long pressure that Welsh has felt in the face of English dominance. Since the end of independence, we have seen that the English culture, language, and government has dominated pretty much everything about Wales. And it's only now in this period, in this latter decade of the 19th century, that we're starting to see a bit of a comeback towards the idea that you would learn in Welsh, that you would have higher education in Welsh, that you would become not only able to converse in English, but also in your language in complex ways, not just in your household, not just on the farm, not just with your neighbors, but that it would be a language worth having discussions with philosophers, with academics, and all those people who have so much to give in the preservation of the language. And really, these became the sounding boards and the starting points for what we see become our I say our like it's me, but the fight back that the Welsh population has towards the reduction of the language. We see the nation begin to understand that the lack of official recognition, the lack of official tolerance towards Welsh was creating a lasting problem. And likely this is the key to the language's survival, or at least for the language's ability to survive better than other languages in similar circumstances who were struggling against, in some cases, official persecution towards their language. And that could be argued with a lot of the Celtic languages of this era. So it's massively important. And in some ways, the fact that Wales kind of snuck off and went on its own allowed it to do this. And it did it not by corporations, not by massive government fiat, but by the Welsh public themselves deciding that it was worth funding these institutions. And finally, the dream that Owain Glyndwr had in the 1400s has finally come to fruition in the 19th century. In the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, Wales will finally have that higher education that he wanted for the country. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching or listening today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always check things out at the Welsh History Podcast at gmail.com. And if you need to reach out to me on social media, you can usually do that at Welsh History Pod, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Welsh History Podcast. And if you are curious or want to help with the funding of this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Welsh History. I will say one thing I've thought about doing as we're growing in size in subscribers on YouTube, and if you want to share the website, the YouTube channel, it would definitely help to get us there quicker, is turning the Patreon into a membership on YouTube rather than having it as a patron, so we can finally wrap up Patreon and I can actually start to use YouTube to try and bring value to that membership. There are definitely ways to do it on YouTube that really aren't as good on Patreon, so I would like to do something along that line. And so if that's something you want to do, or you want to help the podcast in other ways, please like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff on YouTube, as well as listening to the podcast through your normal podcast feeds. It's all very appreciated. And you can find the podcast at youtube.com/@ Welsh History Podcast. Thank you all. Have yourself a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Welsh History Podcast is a member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. To find more information on them, you can do so at evergreenpodcasts.com. Thanks for listening.